There was definitely a time when basically all I was practicing on guitar was jazz, and it occupied a lot of time. These days, I really never even play it. I just don't really seem to have much time. But I wanted to explore in this video kind of what's changed, how I feel about it, and how maybe you feel about it if you care, and also where you can find some of my chord melodies and stuff if you're looking for them. Anyway, here's my first take trying to play Autumn in New York.
This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
if you're interested in getting the backing track for that and also the chord melody, I'll put it up on my Patreon for those people in the higher tier. I think that's maybe where I'm going to put the jazz stuff from now on, unless, you know, someone sends me an email and say, well, I'll just put it in all of this stuff, so let's not do the hard sell. So any member on Patreon, I think there's a £2 tier, £3 tier, or a £5 tier. Instead of, you know, ripping everyone off, I'll put it in the every person tier. So you can grab that chord melody there if you're into this sort of jazz stuff. There's loads of other chord melodies on there, and also backing tracks if you're into that sort of stuff. But yes, so I used to do this thing basically where I listened to Jonathan Kreisberg giving some advice on this, and he basically said, learn a tune a week and spend a week with a tune basically, and then by the end of a year you'll have 52 jazz tunes that you've kind of got a pretty good knowledge of. For me, the process was basically day one, you'll pick a couple of versions of the tune that you want to listen to over and over again, and you'll listen to it, try and take it in, try and learn the lyrics if you can, and also during that phase start to kind of map out the melody on the guitar. Then, you know, day two I'd be starting to think about, okay, well, what are the changes going on here? And then start to, by day three, put the melody and the changes together. And then towards the end of the week really was when I started to think about trying to solo over it. This really was transformational for me in terms of feeling like I was actually getting somewhere. I don't know if any of you guys have started off on a different kind of route with jazz, but for me it started off with like books and stuff like that, and just trying to learn licks and bits and pieces where I actually felt more connected to this. And I guess maybe this might even be the point of view of this video in general, is that I don't really even see myself as a jazz player, and you probably don't either. But what I'm thinking of this as is actually just playing songs from this point on, and whether or not I'm a jazz guitarist or whatever type of guitarist, kind of forget about that and just think about it as playing old songs potentially, or even new songs in an old style, and trying to just play music. I think that is the route for me, which is going to be more beneficial than just saying, you know, I'm not a jazz player. Well, I can sort of dabble in it, and hopefully sometimes some things will come out of the guitar that sound okay. But the main thing that changed for me was that after lockdown, and after having the baby, the jazz gigs around this area that I would get offered would be very low paid, and basically would just about cover your fuel to do them, but also be quite a lot of preparation to get to the stage where you feel comfortable doing this thing. So for me, it wasn't really financially viable anymore to be doing kind of jazz gigs, and the style of jazz gigs that I was doing were not really the sort of style that suited my playing. Now, I think the only sort of thing I could do okay-ish in jazz is kind of play these slow ballads, and that's the stuff that I like to do, and stuff where I feel more relaxed and feel more connected to some sort of music. There's a lot of this jazz stuff out there, which I guess, or many of you may also find that there are certain parts of the genre that you gravitate towards. So gypsy jazz was never one of those, but gypsy jazz around here seems to be the sort of gigs that maybe would come up. And then also these other gigs where it's sort of a mixture of blues, fusion, and like a little bit of jazz, where you get to do occasional ballads. And it was really the ballads where I felt like, well, this is where I'm comfortable. For instance, with a band, I did get to play I'll Be Seeing You live, and you know, you get to take the head and stuff like that, and that was the bits where I felt this is kind of where I'm comfortable. And also there was this other thing where just before lockdown I did a couple of like totally solo concerts, and those were totally nerve-wracking, to the point of being like, this is the scariest thing I've ever done. So I'm on the fence about whether or not I would ever like to do that sort of thing, but I was kind of doing things with a loop pedal, improvising, very kind of edge of the seat stuff that, you know, just a guitar, a chair and a pedal board. It felt very, very weird. But I'm kind of comfortable now with this idea that as and when I get a minute, and I don't know if any of you guys have got some requests for like chord melodies that you want to see me try and tackle, or jazz tunes, feel free to send me a Patreon message or an email if you've got some stuff which you've been looking for, or you're thinking maybe I could do an okay job of that. Another great place that I would say that kind of got me interested in this kind of more relaxed jazz style, I would say, is Tim Lurch. So Tim Lurch would be one of the first channels that I kind of gravitated towards on YouTube with this kind of jazz style. He also has courses on TrueFire, which I think are definitely worth checking out. A really chilled instructor, great knowledge, you know, is a gigging solo jazzer, and has loads of courses on there. You could use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of any individual course, or JNC100 to get $100 off of their all-access pass, which would mean that you could dip in and out of that stuff, dip in and out of aerial posing stuff, Robin Ford stuff, all that sort of stuff. But TrueFire sponsors the channel, so when it's appropriate, I like to kind of mention, and I think Tim Lurch is a great example of, you know, a really chill guy who has great knowledge and has actually been really generous sharing that on YouTube over the sort of last decade, or maybe even more. One of the things that I think it takes quite a lot of is patience with this jazz stuff, and I think it really is rewarding to have like a really focused on one tune at a time. Sort of approach where you can kind of hone in on bits and sort of plan your own thing. I tend to have like a little bit of a skeleton of like an arrangement which sort of starts to fall together, and that's kind of what you'll get my chord melodies. But it's nice to explore and sort of experiment around different bits and pieces. So I was just sitting with Fenton last night while Lenny had a gig, and there was this one bit of the song, and the lyric is feel, and it should go down to a C major like that, and I was thinking to this. Little ideas like that can kind of just pop out, but it does require like a lot of time and a lot of I think sort of focused time where you're thinking about like exploring, and that's something that I think working like around a job, working around like a young kid, I think probably some of you guys can relate. Like sometimes there are some tasks where it's just like I'm not in the headspace to do that, and I'm gonna try and get back into some of this with some of this jazz stuff. So autumn in New York, this I didn't really have much of a chance to practice any of this, so this is kind of very ropey stuff. But if you wanted that chord melody and the backing track, this is one of the favourite tunes of mine, so check that out on Patreon. And yeah, if you've got sort of requests for future jazz sort of explorations, then let me know on Patreon or via email. I'm using the Helix tone here, dual jazz tone as always, but I'm going to try and endeavour to kind of get back on the jazz horse a little bit, because I haven't got many gigs at this time of year anyway, so maybe that's something we can sort of refocus on a little bit. So let me know your thoughts. Cheers for stopping by.